Hey everyone, welcome to the Mighty Books Podcast, where we sit down and chat with mighty authors about their books, message, writing successes, struggles, and other relevant authorship topics. I'm your host, Ryan M. Oliver, author of the Beasts of Men and Gods series. Now let's get started on today's chat. This episode's featured author is independent author and journalist Susanne Bacon. Susanne was born in Stuttgart, Germany, where she lived for nearly 42 years. Telling stories and writing have been second nature to her from the very beginning. Maybe that was also the reason she studied general and comparative science of literature and linguistics at Stuttgart University to obtain a double master's degree, and ended up working first as a freelance journalist for a daily paper, later as an editor, then as the editor-in-chief of a trade magazine. In 2010, she immigrated to the U.S. and has been living with her husband in the South Puget Sound region in Washington state ever since. In 2017, she became a U.S. citizen. Apart from writing on a daily basis, she has a passion for food, reading, music, the fine arts, including photography, and for exploring new places. So, good morning, everybody. We're here with Susanne Bacon. How you doing, Susanne?
Good morning, Ryan. Thank you for having me. It's such an honor to be on your wonderful podcast.
And it's wonderful to have you. So I love to chat with you about your book, the book series, actually, because I got to read one wonderful book, but I know you have several more. I got Delicate Dreams. What other ones do you have on hand?
Actually, there are 6 more so far, and right now I'm writing on novel number 8 in the Wycliff series, but there is also a spin-off which is starting the Emma Wilde series, and Emma Wilde is one character that turns up in my latest Wycliff novel, Greener Grass. Emma, military spouse, and I thought there are no novel series on military spouses, not as far as I know, so that was the reason why I took that character, and I'm starting to build a series on her as well.
Oh, that's fantastic. I love that. So right now, so there's 7 books out in the Wycliff?
That's correct. And they're all standalone novels. So if you pick one, doesn't matter where you start. It is rounded out by itself, but interconnected with the others loosely, because I have this little small town on Puget Sound, somewhere between Olympia and Seattle. Okay. Fictitious, but there is this connection of the town, and of course the characters that occur in this town are recurrent. So if you have read Delicate Dreams, there is Dottie Dolan, the German deli owner in there, and she turns up in each and every of the other books. And then there is Pastor Clement Whalen, for example, who is also recurring quite frequently, or the weird character of Angela Fortescue, who is really some off-putting creature in the first few books, and then she gets her own voice, and you realize that there is a story to why she is behaving this way. And each and every of those books has a theme to themselves. So Delicate Dreams is about dealing with grief and finding a new purpose in life after you've had such a big cut in your existence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely noticed that. I love the kind of the intricacies you have with the different characters. And I was wondering I was looking on your website, I was looking at the different ones you had. I was wondering if you took this one person and you made one book for them and then you swapped out for another person, because you could have gone on and on about Dottie Dolan. She's fun person to read about, honestly. And several other characters there are interesting too. I know I was interested with the younger character, the boy who came in. I won't go do too much details, because if you want to, actually go read the books, I don't want to give away too much. But there's several characters that kind of surprise the main character in there, and she gets to learn about them and whatnot. So it'd be interesting. Is there one about Finn, the younger boy too?
There is actually, it's novel number 4. It's called Clean Cuts, and let me talk about Finn Rover quickly. He is an orphan and a foster child, and he is caught stealing at the German deli, and Dottie takes him under her wings, and he turns out to be quite an imaginative chef at next door's a little restaurant, Le Quartier. And well, we meet him again when he is turning into a chef, and he turns into some drug addicted chef who needs to find his way and needs to cut himself clean from his bad habits.
Oh, very cool. That's awesome. I love that. I love that a lot. Let's see. So the inspiration to write the books, was it something like, did you do a lot of writing when you were a kid, or just you being, so you used to live in Germany for long time, so over 40 years?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
My husband very late in life, and he used to be with the armed forces in England, and traveled through to Germany, where we just coincidentally met and fell in love with each other. And so after I got married, I applied for a green card and came over here to Western Washington. And yeah, so I almost had 42 years of life over in Germany.
Wow.
So my second language, and sometimes you might not just hear it from my accent, but also realize it in my writing, because obviously there might be some stuff that is typical German, either as in idiomatics or sentence building. Even though I have editors, they might not realize that there is a German pinch of language in there.
I did notice it a little bit, and it was delightful. It was nothing, it didn't take away. In fact, it kind of added to it, because it is, and the main character, Lisa in Delicate Dreams, is she's from Germany. At one point, she lived in Germany, so it made sense almost that her inner dialogue, her inner monologue, happened to have a German nuance to it. It was like, that's not how a typical American would say this phrase or this sentence. It was just, I mean, it was so slight. It was a couple of words that would get flip-flopped or something like that, but most people might not even notice it. But I just thought it was charming. It was, you can tell it's English is not your first language. But actually, kind of follow-up question: how do you learn in Germany? Do you learn English from, like, you start learning it, when you're like 10 or 12? You start learning it right in, preschool, as we would call it in America, or how does that work?
Actually, I had an incentive, and the incentive was my great aunt and my aunt on my mother's side, who already lived in Maine, in the state of Maine. And so I always had a hang for the English language. Whenever they visited, I wanted to hear it. And the very first time I read a children's book, I realized that I already knew some English words, and that I was recognizing English words more easily than German words at first. And that was really weird. And it was a gorgeous children's book that still is my favorite children's book. It's One Morning in Maine, actually.
Oh, okay.
So I wanted to be able to read those books. And in Germany, back in the day, we learned English as a second language as of fifth grade. So I was about 9 or 10 when I started out, but I delved into my father's English books from school and high school books and started learning the vocabulary from there. So I was always a little ahead.
Okay, so that's what I thought I heard about from several other foreign exchange students, other people who've lived in Europe and traveled to Europe, that they learn in about fifth grade and start learning that as a second language. I honestly wish they did that.
These days it's earlier, actually. They learn it in preschool, but they don't learn how to write it, and they just learn to spell it in school as they hear it, and then later on they learn how it's really written. So I think that is a little weird, and might make it even more difficult.
I would have to agree with you there. We have something like that here with kids who want to do dual immersion. They'll have, obviously we have English speaking students here, and then they can learn Spanish as well. And, starting from kindergarten all the way up to, I believe, fifth grade and beyond. I think when you get middle school, high school, they stop and it's just English, but you can take the Spanish again as an elective. And I've always found it's challenging, because when you're young, if the kids grasp it really fast, they're still having, even if they're grasping it really fast, they're still grasping 2 sets of vocabulary. That's a lot of vocabulary to handle. I mean, anything with history, reading, writing, just your basic day-to-day life, science, math, anything, other core topics. That's a lot of language to learn just for one language, let alone two. It makes sense to me. I always liked the European model where you start learning it in fifth grade, because I've seen kids. I used to teach, young kids before, and I saw where kiddos were learning Spanish or English, and they didn't grasp it as fast, and so they're progressing, and then they had a harder time communicating with another person about kind of how they're feeling or what's going on, and that became very frustrating for them. And it wasn't until they got a little older where they could discern between the two languages and the vocabulary that they could finally express themselves freely without getting frustrated. So it kind of became that Spanglish, I'm talking about. You've heard that before?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm sure they probably have various versions of that in Europe. I can only imagine with how many different languages to speak over in Europe. I always like that model of start at fifth grade when they've already grasped their first language, their home language, and now they can learn something new. I always thought that was a better idea, but I've never gone through either one, so I can't really speak from experience there. So as a native German, what's it like living in Germany compared to living in America? Do you miss a lot of stuff over in Germany, or it's just, can you tell us about that?
Actually, it's since I have visited the United States quite often ever since I was 15, I've been here like 6 or 7 times before I actually moved over here. It was not such a big difference for me, and not such a cultural shock. I mean, it probably would be different if I had been to the southern states, where the culture is maybe a little more conservative. Is what I'm guessing, compared to what we are living here in Washington State, definitely. So Washington State is pretty similar to Germany, and as to cultural and political attitude. And I wrote a book about that, actually. It's called Home from Home. And that used to be a column in the Suburban Times, which is a bulletin board, so-called bulletin board, actually a daily online medium. And I wrote the column Home from Home in there because everybody kept asking me, how do you like Germany and compared to Washington State, and what's the difference, and what do you miss here, what do you miss from there? And I thought, okay, I'll just grab the different topics, and I just write an article each and every Friday about something like castles and rivers and leisure time things. So one big difference here is the outdoor lifestyle that we have here in Washington State. We have outdoor life in Germany very much too. Of course, we go hiking and boating and swimming, but there is, for example, no recreational clamming or fishing. Fishing, yes, but usually in clubs. You have to be a member. You can't just go take your own boat and go on the Sound or something and start crabbing or clamming. Clamming, for example, is a totally a restricted business in Germany, whereas here it's recreational. And I wrote a chapter of that in my book. That was something totally new that I did over here, and still do.
Well, that's really interesting. I kind of want to take a look at that. I think I'll probably, when I have a moment, I'll take a look at that too. I've always wondered, that's a lot of people who I chatted with who live in different countries, or who when we around one person who's lives somewhere else other than the U.S., we're like, well, what's it like? So that's cool, pretty cool. A little more in-depth knowledge on that. I'd love to see some castles around here, but we don't have those.
We do. Oh, but we do. Actually, there is one here in Lakewood. It's I think it's called Thornwood, and it has been created by someone as a wedding gift to his wife, and he took each and every brick, literally, from English castles and had it rebuilt over here, and each and every interior decorative part, like pillars, windows, and other things like that, have been bought from English aristocrats who obviously needed to make money back in the day. And he put them in here, and now Thornwood Castle is on the shores of American Lake, and you can have a bed and breakfast stay there, and wedding receptions and whatever. So that is a true English castle.
That is hilarious. I had no idea.
Yeah, me neither. You learn while you're looking into those things, you know.
So that's in Washington?
Yeah, here in Lakewood.
Oh my God. It's always funny to hear, like, you know, like myself, been born and raised in Washington. I've not lived in any other state. I've traveled a lot. I've traveled, of course. I've never lived in another state before. And it's funny how you've got people who don't know anything about the state they live in, or very little, compared to like those who travel. And it's like, oh yeah, you didn't know about this? Like, no, it's a hidden gem. Apparently it's really well hidden. So I've been here for a long time and haven't found it yet. So that's hilarious. That's really cool. Okay, I need to go check this out. I need to go check that out. So something I'm really excited to hear about, in your book, Delicate Dreams, Dottie Dolan, the main character, opens up her own German deli. You talked a lot about various foods, and every time I read a chapter or two, I got hungry. So thank you for that. I probably packed on some weight. I probably packed on some weight. I got to stop eating. What now do you like to cook? Is this something that's kind of one of your hobbies, passions, things you like to do?
Oh, it totally is. Actually, I've got a big collection of cookbooks at home, and I started cooking when I was about 10, and I started off right in the middle of things. With a Chinese dish, a wonton soup, and I made the noodle dough myself, and those Chinese ravioli-like things, and broth, and it was wonderful how my family bore with my cooking. And since I've been asking my mother, can I cook for the family again? And she let me. So she was quite encouraging. And I always loved watching her. When I was a tiny child, I sat on the top of the washing machine next to the stove top. Mind you, that is a really dangerous place to be, but I never hurt myself. And I just watched her how she did things. I never wrote down any of her recipes, but I have been told by my family that actually my cooking is just like my mother's. So when I'm going to the traditional dishes. As to the deli in which I place Dottie, yes, I have been even working in a deli. We've got a wonderful German deli here in Lakewood. It's Hess Bakery and Deli, which is also mentioned in the book because Dottie gets her pretzels and bread from that place.
Mm-hmm.
At one point, I thought I want a job, and I felt I needed to change something, grow better roots here. Before that, I had been traveling between Germany and the US constantly, being a business consultant, a translator, and whatnot. And it started becoming really, really stressful. So I thought, I'll drop this, I'll do something totally different. So I applied, and I ended up behind the deli counter. So there is some very personal experience in there. And that is why I probably have the insight of writing about it. And that's probably the closest experience that I ever got to the food industry. Everything else is pretty much research. When I'm writing about the flower store, for example, in the second book, I've never worked in a flower store. I just read up a lot about floristics, and the restaurant kitchen is the same. I just read some books about restaurant kitchens, amongst them Anthony Bourdain, who really inspired me because I needed a drug-addicted chef. So I mean, you get some insight in kitchen lingo and restaurant lingo. And the latest book is based on a landscaping business. Greener Grass is the title that is also, of course, going into landscaping. And I asked a master landscaper, a friend of mine, about tips for gardening and for landscaping. So that's the intro for each and every chapter in there. And the main character in Greener Grass is a landscaper who finds herself in a life crisis and thinks that she is not doing good enough and that everybody else is doing better, which is the theme for all the characters in this book. The grass is always greener on the other side. Basically it is the grass is greener where you water it.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. I do love that. That's fantastic. And I like that you kind of broke up the chapters into months, which I wasn't sure how I was going to work, but I actually liked it really well, and it made sense actually with a with this one at least. Do you do the same thing with the other ones? Break it up into months. The chapters, like chapter one's January, chapter two's February, or is it a little different for each book?
Totally different, actually. The next one is an insight into flower language, because one of my topics in there, or the main topic, is the difficulty of communicating with other people if you're not putting the right words to what you think, or if you just shut up or shut down entirely. And there is also the language of flowers. So a single red rose as the symbol of love, or a white lily is the one for purity. So you can, if someone knows about the language of flowers, you can kind of send a message by sending someone a plant, a cactus, for example, that don't be so prickly, and things like that. So these are the topics of my of greener grass, wordless wishes. There is also, for example, a little girl who has been shocked into silence. She doesn't speak anymore until she is getting an opportunity to communicate in different ways with someone who has been shut down by a teacher who has caused a trauma. It's quite yeah. You see, it's people of all walks of life that I'm describing, grown-ups, children, even animals, the whole shebang. And yeah, my latest one is going to be about Hollywood showing up in Wycliff and turning everything upside down. And the intros to each chapter will be excerpts from a fictitious playwright. So it's from a movie script.
Oh, okay. I gotta say, when I was reading the first one, have you ever? It reminded me of a town nearby here called Port Gamble.
Yeah.
That is like, did you take Port Gamble at all and kind of create Wycliff, or is it a different town in your mind, or just maybe you didn't? I don't know if you even heard about it, but that's where my mind went to.
It's too funny, but I've heard all kinds of places mentioned, Federal Way and Stillicum, which is the funniest of all, because Stillicum actually appears as Stillicum, and no, it's none of these places. I was inspired by a mixture of my favorite Washington town, Port Townsend, and it's got the bluff, and by the very, very steep bluff in Port Angeles, where you've got these really steep stairs going up the bluff in the middle of town. So if you mix those together, the Victorian character of Port Townsend and that really steep staircase bluff from Port Angeles, you get my Wycliff. And I've got a totally different layout of the town. So the harbors and the wharves are in different directions. And the more I write about it, the more distinct my grid gets. And there is a lighthouse in the middle of the town instead of on the town border in Port Townsend. And so it has become Wycliff. Over time, it's become more and more Wycliff.
That is really cool. I love that. I love the combining of different inspiration in different areas that you see. That's so cool. You
will also realize I have the motto, where fiction meets reality. I always mix up real businesses, real people, real places with my fictitious novels. So people recognize that, and it seems to be really appealing, because it gives you something more of authenticity and of identification.
Do you do that with your characters' names too? Or are they all just people? Do you take names for people you know and put them in books, or do you change the names and just use people as inspiration?
That is the funniest thing. My characters, my fictitious ones, tell me that they want to be named a certain way. I had in my novel Suddenly Snow, I have a character who's called Pippa. I wanted her to be Philippa, and she said, no, I'm not Philippa, I'm Pippa. So it didn't work out until I called her that, and after that she was really smooth. As to the real characters, they have their real names, and I asked them, is it okay with you if I write you in? Some even asked me, can you write us in? Wycliff didn't have a post office, for example, until one day I came to the post office in Stillicum, and Arnie there, who was the postman there, asked, do you have a post office down in your fictitious town? I said, no. He said, can you write us in? And so yes, I made them one of those parts in my third novel, where I have a blackmailer, and he and his colleague in Wycliff, they have been swapped out because there is a rotating system between the post offices. So he's in Wycliff. They help find out who the blackmailer is.
Oh, really? That is
so, but under the real name.
I love it. I love it. That's so cool. So real quick, slide back to the food part. You said it's a big part of your life. Have you ever thought about making a cookbook?
Well, actually, each and every novel of the Wycliff series has 3 recipes in.
Yes, it does.
So basically, I'm kind of writing a cookbook, but let me tell you, no, I don't really intend to write recipes as something that anybody else should rely on. I'm a person who is just throwing in a pinch of this and a dash of that, and I hate writing down the exact amounts. That is what I find so creative about cooking, and what is totally upsetting for me about baking, that with baking you have to stick to the directions, otherwise you get a catastrophic outcome. And now I'm the person who just loves to throw in stuff until the very serving.
I love it.
No cookbook.
Yeah, it's a lot of people I talk to who are avid cookers. I mean, obviously, or chefs or whatever you want to call it. People, culinary, I don't know, enthusiasts. People who like to eat, and actually enjoy cooking. They do that too. It's like, I don't really have a recipe anymore. I just know what goes in it, and I know the amounts because I've been doing it so long. I know by taste, by color, by all that, and I'm like, that makes more sense. I mean, I've done I would say the few recipes I am expert at. I don't have to balance anything out. It's just throw it in there. Yep, that looks right. Go. So
yeah, there you go. And it's also, if you have a cookbook you go and buy, you usually end up altering the recipe the more often you cook a recipe, because you want to alter it to something that is actually yourself and not somebody else, unless that recipe tastes perfect to you in the first place.
Yeah, it's more of a guide than anything.
Yeah, that's how I see it too.
Yeah. If you guys are interested, in her first book, you've got a recipe for fish soup, and there's a recipe for goulash soup in here. So if you want to get in on that, and potato soup also, which I want to try. So definitely look into that. So that's pretty cool. You not only get a cool story, but you also get some food recipes to go along with it. So just a more incentive to go check out her books. So I want to actually ask you about your career as a journalist. So it says here you were a journalist for more than 20 years.
Oh, meanwhile, it's probably it's more than that. That was 2015. So don't make the math.
I don't want to do math. So you've done it for a long time. That's awesome. Where have you been writing for? And you said you wrote a column. What's it like to be a journalist?
Busy. It's you depending on which business line you're in, you are working on deadlines. And, I started out as a newspaper journalist, as a freelancer, and I was paid by the line, 10 cents a line or 10 pfennigs a line, and 10 marks for an appointment. So you tried hard to work in order to get something that you could live on. Or so I was working like 60 hours a week, and turned up in the office each and every day, even though I was originally just for the cultural pages. I ended up writing pretty much about everything. So politics, community projects, architecture, festivities, you name it.
That's really cool.
And that was just 1 year. And we had a daily deadline. And if you missed that, your article was just written for zilch, because you couldn't, at 9 o'clock, everything had to be done, or 8:30, something like that. And if you missed out that deadline, your article came out only the day after. So if you had a theater night, for example, you knew that you wouldn't make the deadline of that for next day's paper. So that is why it appeared only in like 2 days later.
Okay,
And
that
then
makes
later
sense.
on, I did an internship with a trade magazine for the office and stationery business and industry. From there, I changed within the same publishing house to Germany's then only trade magazine for the industry of art, craft, and needlecraft designs, and I became the editor-in-chief of that and stayed that for years on end. So yeah, till 2010, I was the head of that magazine, and I was traveling worldwide because it had formerly been just a German magazine, but I said, listen, we get all that stuff from international markets. We need to cater to those people too. We need to get ads from them. We need to talk about what those businesses are like. And so I just widened the field and had wonderful business contacts to the US, to China, to Japan, to New Zealand even.
Wow. So you travel to all those different countries?
No.
No? New Zealand sounds really appealing.
Traveled widely through Europe. I had the honor to be invited by Messe Frankfurt exhibition to do readers' trips to their shows in the US and in China, but that is the most outlandish places that I got, so to say, if you can call that outlandish.
For someone who's only been really traveled to, a handful of states, and I traveled to Italy for like 10 days years and years ago. That
Neat.
Sounds outlandish, but it sounds marvelous. So that's pretty cool. So are you still a journalist now then?
It depends. When I realize that someone says, can you write about me, do an interview, or just like help promote my business because I founded it newly and I need some more attention, then I turn my journalist mode, and either I fit it into my column Across the Fence, which is talking about things that people usually haven't experienced yet, but I invite them to kind of come jump across your fence and experience a new business, a personal concept, a new place, a new food, something you might have heard of, but not read up about. So that is what my latest column is. And it's a mixture of being entertaining and kind of educational.
I like that. And so you said this is a current column you're writing.
Yes, yes.
Where can we find that if people are interested?
That is at subtimes.com. It's this, or you just can Google the Suburban Times and it will jump up, and it's a bulletin board. You can subscribe for free and it arrives in your email box each and every day punctually at around 6 o'clock.
I like it. Cool. I'll have to check that out too. I love learning things too.
and my column is only there on Fridays. So each and every Friday, there is a new column coming up.
Very cool. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you for talking about that. So that's you have a weekly column, and then you've got a whole smattering of books. And how long does it take you to write these books?
Depends. My very first one took me a year, and about quarter of a year of research. I was reading up avidly. It's a historical novel, and with real true facts woven in. So you can't mess that up really if you're writing about history. You can build your fiction on that foundation, but it has to be really, really well researched. And I worked hard on that. So it took me a year.
Wow.
But the other ones, Delicate Dreams, it was just like as if a plug was taken out after I had this historical novel out of my system. That one took me, I think, 3 months. And then I had my editors look into it and check it, and I wrote it about 20 times. That's how often I usually end up with editing and rewriting. And yeah, I think within 6 months it was in the market.
Wow, that's impressive. I mean, it is a very digestible book. It's nothing so big, and it's not super small. I think it was like right around like the 240 range page wise. And that's a perfect amount. Like you can read if you only have time for, a 10 minutes a day to read, or you've got all the time to read. You can knock it out in a day if you're really into it, if you got time to do it. But if you got a busy schedule, but you want to give time to yourself, these are wonderful to just sit down and give yourself that 10-15 minutes of peace and quiet, and get an appetite to read. So I highly recommend it. I'm going to check out their other ones too, especially
Thank you.
especially the historical one. I want to check that out, and I'm going to look at your column too. I'm always interested in see what people are doing, because what we see is not necessarily what all it goes into it. I mean, I know it works for me and several other authors I've talked to, and just life in general. You see this one little piece, but it takes how long to get to that one little piece, that peak there.
True, because the series has been festering inside of me for ages. All those 8 books were kind of already in my mind after I had written Delicate Dreams. I just wanted to write something feel good, something that makes you escape from the troubles that you've got, and meet people who could be real around you. And my columns actually are part marketing instrument in order to get the word out that there is someone writing some more. But it's also, I started with the columns because I wanted to put out some positive counterpoint to what's going on in this world. Mm-hmm. And this is why after Home from Home was kind of finished, I didn't come up with any more topics that I could compare. I thought, but there is so much to talk about that doesn't fit in this German-American concept. Why not just try and do something mindful, write mindful articles that give people something to think of, that makes them feel good, and take the thoughts to a different place.
Mm-hmm. It's also, I like getting different perspectives on things, especially on topics you might not necessarily know about too much. So if you dive into that, you might find something that's insightful that you would never have thought about, because you've never experienced those things. So I'm always advocate for reading as much as possible from various people and places, because we can't experience everything. Everyone else experiences their own individual thing. So it's nice to experience that through books and articles and other just conversations too. So we've talked, you briefly in our previous conversation, we talked about sort of feedback earlier before we started the interview. We talked about the feedback you've been getting from your books. Can you dive in a little bit about what kind of feedback you've gotten from the Wycliff series?
Oh, sure enough. The fun thing is that I know quite a few people through a historical museum here in Stillicum, and one of them owned a yarn store over here in Lakewood, and that lady said she loved to be read to. And I said, I love reading to people, and I miss that so much. So we came up with a plan. Why not have an event at the store? Invite her customers to sit and knit and crochet and do whatever needlework they wanted. And I'd read to them from my books. The fun thing is that the writing process is very much something that you do on your own, and you don't get any response, of course, and you're dealing with your book and just want to get your points over, but you don't know whether you have actually gotten everything right. So when I started reading those books out, I got all the responses, and they were absolutely amazing because they turned out to be often so much more intense than I had anticipated it. One of those ladies, for example, just was stuck was astonished when I said there is a recipe about potato soup, and she said, oh, potato soup, and she reminisced about her mom making potato soup. And the next thing that I knew was that the next time we had that event going, she brought her two sisters, and actually those three sisters were attending all my reading events from then on, and basically they inspired me for a set of triplets in my novel Suddenly Snow. So this is how inspiration comes, also from the people who give me response. But also with Finn, we talked about Finn earlier, the chef who was an addict, and his boss is a chef who has been shot in the back, and now he is paraplegic, and he has to deal with being a paraplegic. And it was like, I sent each and every character to him to give him comfort, and he wouldn't be comforted. And it was probably the hardest stuff that I've ever written in my novels, to write him out of that big depression. My readers actually at one point hollered out, "Oh, come on, get it together, guy! You can't sit and pout all the time." So
you're feeling invested. That's good.
That was something that I'd never expected to happen, that they really got that much into it, that they talked to the character.
That's awesome. Well, they can connect with it. I mean, it's easy to connect with these characters, especially with all the different references you have for at least this part of the country. It's nice too. And you flesh out a lot of their backgrounds, which
yes.
I thought was really helpful. And I was wondering, actually, when I was reading, I was like, I wonder if this one's going to have a spin-off book with it, because you went so in depth with the background. More or less, when I read about a new character or something that's kind of, talking with the main one, you get like about a paragraph's blurb worth of they did this, that, and the other thing. But you went on like 2 or 3 pages and talked about their whole background, and they came up again. But it definitely makes sense that since there's more books, you've already got a good chunk there. Now you can run with it for the next book. So it makes sense that you have that. I like that a lot. So you're getting good feedback. That's stellar. Any favorite books that you have read or have inspired you?
Definitely, yes.
You read Run when you were a kid, but anything else as an adult?
Totally, yes. Maeve Binchy, the Irish author, is my absolute favorite, and she is writing, or she used to be writing books around a small town in Ireland, and had characters that were recurring in there. And I thought that was a pretty good method to bring about the points that you wanted to push to people, the messages that you wanted to give. And basically, Delicate Dreams was never really set up as a series. I just wanted to get that book out of my system because it was there. Yeah. And then people started asking me, what's going to happen with Wycliff? What is going to happen to Angela Fortescue? What's going to happen with Pastor Wayland? And I realized, oh my gosh, I'm not done. And that is when I only thought, okay, let's make a series. And here I am.
Isn't that funny how it just kind of organically gets out of hand?
Yep.
In a great way.
Oh, and some other fun thing about which I hear when talking with other authors, it probably happens to you as well, is sometimes your characters are just hopping outside the range you wanted to write them in, so they misbehave, and you have to rein them in again. And I let them misbehave because that is so much more fun. There are wedding scenes, or rather engagement scenes, in my books that I never intended to write that way. They are all very, very individual, and I probably wanted them to be kneeling in front of the woman of their choice with a rose between their teeth and whatever. No. None of them does it. It's everything. Every single engagement scene in there is totally different, and that's because the characters want it that way. It's not because I wanted it, but it fit them, and they said I want it that way, so I'm going with them. It's like talking to your inner voices. Sounds a bit weird, I know.
It may, but I say the same thing. The voices tell me to do it this way, and it kind of freaks people out just because I like to do that kind of stuff. But I've actually heard that from other authors too. They go, one author I was talking to, he says for his books, he'll go on a walk, he'll have a little notepad with him, he'll walk around, he goes, and he'll just think about one character and give basically hypothetical situations. It goes, what if this person was thrown into this situation? What would she
Mm-hmm.
say? What's her favorite way? What's her favorite? Who's her favorite person to go to for advice? And what then even simple things like what's her favorite dish? What's her favorite drink? And he would write all that down, have that, and all that information would actually help make her into the person or character that she was, and make those spontaneous, sometimes random, strange actions in the books. And it's a fun thing to do. I've had it happen too with mine.
I guess that.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah, it's a thing. So you said, so you've got 7 books right now that are written for Wycliff, and then you're starting your 8th one. And
I have, I'm at chapter 6 out of a plan 10 plus epilogue.
Okay, awesome.
I'm on my way there.
Okay, so after, and this is a different character.
Yes.
So after that, are you gonna keep going? You got more.
Yes, there are, but currently I'm not planning on the Wycliff novel after the next one. I'm planning on the next Emma Wilde one, because that one is pressing. It wants out of the system. So that is what I'm writing out right now. And that is about a military spouse. And since I've been a military spouse myself, my husband's retired by now, I thought this is an angle that has been kind of neglected by literature. I mean, you have autobiographies or maybe even biographies, but I actually don't know about a series that features a military spouse. And so I thought, why not just try and speak to that group, even though I was one for very, very short, because I married very, very late. And came over here very, very late, and the military careers only last so very long.
Mm-hmm.
But I became a lead key spouse for the squadron of my husband's, and so I had some insight in that, and I saw a lot of different stories of different spouses of different ages, and I think that shapes a good basis, good foundation to put all this into a different story.
Mm-hmm.
Story, and it will be also different because this one centers on one person. It's not on a town, but on the development of that person and of her relationships, and with a little crime aspect in there too. She becomes an involuntary detective.
Oh, very cool. Well, and around here, I mean, in Washington, especially Kitsap County area, you have a lot of military presence. You got a big military presence.
True.
So, I mean, if you're, I seriously doubt you're going to have any problems finding people to read it once they find it, especially those military spouses who will, definitely connect with that type of book. So, I hope you well for that. That's for sure.
I hope so too. I hope it speaks to them.
I hope so. Well, so let's see. While you're writing, do you give yourself any daily quotas or weekly quotas to get by? I know you're a journalist, so you work with deadlines. When you're writing your novels, do you give yourself I want this done by this time, or do you just kind of let it organically flow?
No, indeed, I have deadlines for myself. So I used to try and get my books out by summer, say late June, because of the summer vacations, so I could get it out for people to grab it and take on vacation with them. And now I've got 2 books usually a year, so I'm trying to get one out also around that point of time, and then one in time for Christmas business in September.
Wow.
So I'm trying to work that into my schedule, which
the right machine
down daily. Yes.
Yeah, that's excellent. I found that's the best way to continue it. You can write something and it won't be the best thing you've ever written before, but you're at least writing, progressing the story, because you can always go back and edit it later. Your thoughts.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And if I'm not writing or not working on one manuscript, I can still work on something totally different, which is why I'm working on different projects continuously. So if I'm say not in the mood to work on a Wycliff novel because I'm still pondering about one situation in a scene. I still have the opportunity to write either a column article and submit that for maybe even a month ahead, or I can write a short story, or maybe even a poem, you know?
Yeah, that's actually exactly what I do. Anytime I'm writing and I'm like, I am not in the mood to do this. I don't have the right mindset. I haven't figured all this out. I mean, even just doing a simple, like just a journaling or something, I found
Right.
is really helpful. It's more or less kind of gives you some reflective, you put it out there, you go, okay, is this something to worry about? Is this something, can I plan this out a little better? And journaling kind of gets it out there. Okay, I feel better. Or, all right, well, now I've got this plan worked out. So tomorrow I can actually get what I want to get done. But I'm still writing though.
Totally, and it makes you addicted to writing. Actually, if you have this routine, you actually have a bad conscience if you're not doing it. It's a good kind of addiction.
Yeah, I felt guilt for not writing a couple times. Mostly my sleep, lack of sleep sometimes will hit me like, you just need to go to sleep and not go downstairs and write, because if you go write, you're going to be there for 2 hours and then that's less sleep you're going to get. So you kind of have to make that balance. Yeah, I totally get it.
True.
It's amazing. Are you more or less a daytime writer, nighttime writer, or just kind of hit you whenever the inspiration jives?
I guess it's my journalistic routine to mostly sit down after breakfast and start writing away. And it's easy enough because I don't have a full-time job other than being a homemaker.
Okay.
It's easy enough to sit down and write whenever I feel like it, but I try to make it a morning routine. Sometimes I'm taking a break in between, read something or watch a movie or whatever, or do my home chores. And then I do some writing in the afternoon again. And but it takes, yesterday, for example, I had planned to just write one scene. I ended up writing 2 scenes, and that was pretty cool. It took me way longer than I had intended, but feels good.
Absolutely. Well, what do you hope for others to learn from your books, to get from your books?
Mindfulness, I guess, and mindfulness in a way that is a critical stance towards what's happening along one's way, trying to be kind to people and trying to be considerate, but in a way that you're not denying who you are yourself.
We got a little more time left, so I'm going to throw this last 2 questions at you. So as a child living in Germany, what did you want to be when you grew up?
That differed, and it depends on how long you're a child. I wanted to be a teacher, but I always wanted to be a storyteller. I wanted to write books. But I didn't know how to. I was actually, as soon as I could write, I borrowed the typewriter of my parents and I started writing stories. And I was a narrator way before that. I told my brother, who was 2 years younger than I, or who is 2 years younger than I, good night stories that I made up for him when I was barely 5 or 6. So I guess I was always a storyteller. And I wanted to write books like Astrid Lindgren and the guy who wrote One Morning in Maine. I brought out a tiny little magazine for my family that came out on a weekly basis, and my brother collected them actually, so they might still be out there somewhere. And yes, being a writer, that was what I always wanted to be, and I guess I already was it without realizing.
That's incredible. I know some people have it right from the get-go, and others discover it along the way. So that's really cool. You started right when you were a kiddo and then going all the way up to adulthood. And I mean, you're still a journalist. I mean, you're doing that and an author. So it's followed you.
Yes, it is. And I had wonderful people along the way. Let me tell you that too. I had a teacher who very much supported me writing poetry, and I still had contact with her when I finally brought out my very first poetry book. And the journalists at my newspaper did an article as soon as I published my very first book. So I got support all the way. I had a marvelous colleague at a furniture store where I was jobbing as a student, and she did the marketing for me. I mean, it was simply amazing to have some person there decorating the entire store on the themes of your poetry, putting your poetry out there, having the book at the cash register and say, here, this is my colleague, buy.
That's awesome.
I had some very, very active people, and it's the same over here. I've never been aware that people could be so supportive. Like the Stoicum Historical Museum has my books in their store. Then this wonderful friend of mine who offered me the events at her store. Then there is the Gig Harbor Literary Society that has been founded by my fantastic friend and author Larry Fowler. It's so amazing what support does for you, and it gives so much confidence. You, for example, I wouldn't ever have met you without that Gig Harbor Literary Society, and here we are now, and all of a sudden another world opens, you know.
Yeah, that's how I feel with I meet I meet a new friend who's written books, and we have a new kindred spirit to chat with about writing in the process of that pretty regularly lately in the last I'd say last year and a half, 2 years, since the book writing really took off. And it's very helpful, because writing books is not easy. It's not easy. It's a long process. It's enduring. You sometimes have to struggle to get through even simple scenes so you can finish that book. And it's really great when you have people who are supporting your dreams. I absolutely love the people that are in the community. And I support them like crazy, and they support me like crazy. It's just a good group to be with. It really is.
Totally.
Yeah. So I think we're going to wrap this up. I want everyone to go out there and buy a bunch of her books, because they're quite delightful. You need to get on this and venture into the town of Wycliff. Is it Wycliff or Wycliff?
I pronounce it Wycliffe, like the Reformator. But if you want to call it Wycliffe, go ahead. Okay. I'm not worried about that.
Okay. So whether you pronounce it Wycliffe or Wycliff, go ahead and go get a copy of these books. And so with that said, where can we get a copy of your Wycliffe series?
All my books are available via Amazon.com. I've got an author page there. It's Susanne Bacon. You spell it with a USA in the name and a double N-E. So it's because that is often misspelled, and you might not find it then as easily. Or you can go to my website, which is SuzanneBacon.com. And amongst the books, you find a direct link to my author page on Amazon.
I love that. Thank you so much, Susanne, for coming on to the Mighty Books podcast. It was an absolute delight having you. And I'm hungry still from all our conversation about food. So with that said, we're going to sign off. Take care, everybody, and have a fantastic day.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Are you an author? Do you know someone who is? If so, then message me, Ryan Oliver, at ryanmoliver.com to set up a free appointment to discuss being showcased on the Mighty Books podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe to the Mighty Books YouTube channel and share the link to this and more episodes with your friends and family. Thanks for listening. So long for now. Stay mighty and keep reading.